Hey, I'm Jeff and welcome back to another video. If you can't already tell, I have a very large monstera in front of me here. This is my monstera that I've been growing in straight water for the last about 22 months, and it's been doing absolutely wonderful. So today I'm going to be removing it from the 4-liter pickle jar and placing it in a much larger container. I have an 8-liter glass jar. Plus I'm also going to be doing a chop and prop. So I want to take the top portion of the plant, place it in the container, and then that way it can continue to upsize on the plank here. Plus I'll talk about how I got this plant to be this large so quickly. It is easily one of my fastest and healthiest plants that I have in my collection, so let's check it out. So of course the first thing I'm going to show is the root system for this plant, and you can see it's just absolutely busting out of this pickle jar. In one of my previous videos for this plant, I did have to smash the container that it was in, just because the top or the opening is pretty narrow, and I think that's going to have to be the case again for this time. I did buy a much larger glass container. So this one is a 2-gallon or 8-liter container, which I bought from Walmart. It's actually like a large cookie jar. And yeah, it doesn't have that narrow opening like the pickle jar, so this one will be easy to remove once it outgrows this. I don't know what I'm going to use next once it outgrows this one, but you can just see the size difference between the two. So this one, it might have to get smashed again, just in order to not damage the roots, I guess, when removing it from the narrow opening on the top. Now the reason for the chop and prop is over time the plant gets fairly tall. Obviously it's very large. The leaves themselves are about 2 feet in length. So I want to control the size of the plant just as it continues to grow and get larger leaves. I'll show you the placement of the plant here shortly. But I'm not sure if the stem goes all the way down to the bottom of the pot. I'm pretty sure it does. I did not, or I have not cut it in the past. So what I want to do, or what I'm thinking I want to do, is cut it somewhere around here, like either this node or this node. But I want to take it out of the container here first, just to make sure that it has a sufficient root system to sustain the top portion of the plant. I have been tucking in, I'm just going to rotate this plant, I have been tucking in the aerial roots, into the water so that these top ones can receive water and nutrients as well. So that will not only help the plant long term, but it already has kind of that established root system. Aerial roots, when they're above soil or above water, they generally collect like humidity and kind of nutrients from the ambient air. Whenever it rains, I read that these little scales on the roots help collect water. Now in your home, these aerial roots don't really do much else other than just kind of structural support. Now my home is about 42% humidity. It's not in the tropical conditions, so it's probably not obtaining moisture or nutrients from the ambient air in my home. There's a nice little root right there that's latching onto the plank. So that's why I tuck these aerial roots back into the water so that they can transition from just being regular supporting aerial roots into roots that provide nutrients and water uptake. So that's kind of the, I guess, very brief explanation of aerial roots. I bought this plant from a big box store in, I believe it was February 2023. It was just kind of your standard monstera that had, you know, a leaf size like this. Here's some of the original leaves, like this is a fairly small leaf. The reason why I bought that plant was to make a video on how to separate numerous plants in one pot, but ultimately it ended up turning into a propagation video. So I took a cutting from the plant and I basically just stuck it in water and I didn't know what to do with it. Over time, the goal for this plant was to see if I can get it into a mature form, just as I've never seen a strictly water-grown monstera reach maturity. Obviously by these leaves you can see it's received the secondary fenestrations, so this is definitely one of my favorite plants. It is the most rewarding. So there's definitely some things that I learned about this plant along the way, and you might be asking yourself, it can't be just as simple as placing it in a container of water. but I promise you it is. So like I say in pretty much every one of my videos, light is the most important thing for a plant. You want to make sure that it's receiving enough light to sustain the growth. Whenever you see pictures or questions on platforms like Reddit saying or asking, why isn't my plant upsizing? It's not getting larger leaves. It's looking really kind of stretched out. It's just overall not looking good. Those kind of things. 9 times out of 10, it's because of a light issue. It's probably not receiving enough light. So get yourself a light meter so you can determine exactly the amount of light that your plant is receiving or not receiving. My plant is beside the Rudsta IKEA greenhouse cabinet and it's receiving light from the Burena T10 vertical grow light. Now if I put the light meter close to the leaf here, you can see it's probably around 330 foot candles, which is in the kind of lower end of medium light. So this is perfect for this plant. It's not receiving too much light. It's not receiving, very little. Kind of in that medium range is perfect for this plant. We always hear that plants growing in soil need airflow to the roots. That's why we have it in a nice chunky mixture, just so that the roots don't suffocate and ultimately lead to root rot. The same thing goes for plants that are growing in water, and you might be asking yourself, well, they're completely submerged in water, how do they get oxygen? Well, obviously there's oxygen in the water right now, and that's why you need to switch out the water quite frequently. Now, it's fairly easy when you have a small container like this. You don't want to have like stagnant, grimy water, like right here. It's pretty cloudy. It's not looking the greatest, so it's obviously fairly easy to empty the container of water and fill it up with some fresh water. Not only does it provide clean water, but it also provides new, fresh, oxygenated water to the root system in order for them to breathe. Now, when you have a much larger plant, like the monstera over there, it can be quite difficult to empty out the water every week. So I came up with a solution probably about a year ago to the problem of getting oxygen to the roots. I bought this little air pump off of Amazon. This is the AR11. It is a USB powered mini pump, and it does have a little air stone which I placed in the bottom of the pot, and you can see it is pumping out the oxygen bubbles. This thing has been doing extremely well, and I run this 24 hours a day. I just leave it plugged in and I just let it do its thing. Whenever I see the water level getting a little bit low, then I will simply just top up the water with a nutrient-rich solution. I'll talk about fertilizer and all that kind of stuff here in a minute, but that's pretty much all I do is I just top it up as the water level drops. I don't really switch out the water entirely unless it's looking really grimy, but for the most part, it's been really clear. The roots look nice and white and healthy. Now, a little while ago, I did have a problem with algae. Anytime you have a light source shining on water, it's going to develop algae. And I just solved that with placing a little nursery pot, or placing this glass container in a nursery pot, and that pretty much blocks out the light to the root system. So here's the container. It just sits right in that, and that way it blocks out any light to the root system, and that way I don't get any algae buildup in the roots. And that way it keeps the water nice and clean as well. You can see it's pretty clear in there. So overall it's done really well. This is what I use for fertilizer, and I use this for pretty much all of my houseplants. It's Dynagrow Foliage Pro. I believe it's Super Thrive now. I can't find it anywhere here, but the formula itself is pretty much the same. The nice thing about this product in particular is you can not only use it for your plants and soil, but it does have a hydroponic dosing as well. So I just follow that. Basically what I do is in this 4-liter container, I add about 4 to 5 mils of this solution into, or this liquid, just straight into the water, and obviously with the air pump it helps circulate that as well. So I will fill up a 4-liter container. I do have a spray bottle, or you can use it like a 4-liter jug. I will kind of pre-mix it in the container, and then as I see the water level dropping, I just top it up. So yeah, this is a super easy plant to care for. It basically takes the guesswork out of everything. I don't have to know exactly when to water it, because it's sitting in water or it's growing in water. The only thing I have to do is just top up the water. I don't have to remember when I last fertilized it or if it needs fertilizer, because it consistently gets fertilizer. I just pre-mix it in that jug and then top up the water as needed. It's getting oxygen from the little air pump, and it's getting light from the Burena T10 vertical grow light. So it's receiving everything that it needs, and arguably it's healthier than my monstera that's growing in soil. This one, it's probably within the span of like 10, 12 feet. This one, super, super healthy. The one growing in soil, it constantly has thrips. I'm having to take it over to my bathroom to spray it off, treat it with insecticidal sprays as well for thrips. So now I'm not saying that this is totally resistant to pests, but definitely I don't see thrips as much as I do on my soil grown one. And definitely this one is a much more vigorous or faster growing plant. So there's definitely some benefits to growing a plant in hydroponics or just in straight water. I guess everyone has their preferences, but I just wanted to see how this plant would perform in water, and it's basically exceeded my expectations. Okay, so I placed the jar here in this container here, this little tub, and I always advocate for safety, so I'm gonna put the safety goggles on. I do have a little towel, which I'm just gonna put over top of it, just so I don't have any glass shards flying. And then, just like previous videos, I have this tiny little hammer. So I'm just going to crack it up here. Make sure I get the top there. There we go. Making sure all the glass is in there. And I can just gonna knock off all the little pieces here. And I'm gonna take this right outside into the trash. Just getting rid of all these little small pieces here. So overall, got a little bit of rot at the bottom here, so I'm going to rinse that off really good, but the rest of the leaves, the roots look really good. So I sprayed off a lot of those goopy, rotten roots at the bottom, and now you can see here, the stem is fairly thin right there, but as you go up the plant, you can see it gets to be fairly thick. So I do want to cut it back. I think at this note. I was thinking somewhere higher, but I think I'm going to cut it right here. I'm just going to lower the plant on the plank slightly, and then we'll kind of go from there. So I'm going to make the chop, I think, at this very thin portion right here and see if I can get that portion of the stem out. So I'm just going to try and, I don't know what I'm doing here, untangle this a bit, I guess. Obviously there's going to be some broken roots, and I can see a little piece of glass in there, so I'm just going to set that aside. And I just want to feel where the actual stem goes down to. So yeah, it goes right down to the bottom. So I'm going to cut it right here and then try and, I guess, wiggle the top portion of the plant out. So I'm going to cut it right there. Clearly need a sharper blade. I'm going to take this off the plank. Okay, now let's see if I can get this lower portion out. Here comes the bottom portion of the stem, and this actually has quite a bit of rot internally. I'm just going to pull this apart here. So quite a bit of rot on the bottom portion here. So I'm glad I took this out, and I'm saving, or I can drop the plant here by about 6 inches or so. So this one you can place back in a container. I might actually take this little node cutting here, but what I want to do is secure this back on the plank just a little bit lower, and then I'll place it in the new container. I want to get water back in here as fast as I can, just so I don't dry out those water roots. Here's the little Airstone air pump thing. So I basically just place this, in the middle of the plant and right at the bottom. And then I'll just kind of leave it like that. You can secure it if you want. I just kind of let it dangle. I'm gonna add water into the container here. Probably in the next week or so, I would expect there to be a little bit root rot like this, just disgusting stuff. Just because I did damage the roots quite significantly. So I'm expecting some of those roots to kind of get a little bit mushy. I'm also going to let this plank dry out. I did get it wet on the bottom here, so obviously, oh man, I just took a chunk out of the plant. I'm going to be taping the plank to the outside of the container, but obviously it has to be dry in order for the Gorilla Tape to hold and be secure. So for right now, it's stable, it's upright. It's kind of being supported by these lower leaves. So I'm simply just going to add some water, put some nutrients in here, fire up the old water pump there, and then just let it recover. Okay, and I told you guys I had a garden hose in my basement. It actually reaches from the laundry room over here. So I'm just going to add some water in, 8 liters of water. And then I'm gonna add some nutrients in here as well. And now, since I'm using twice as large of a container, I'm gonna have to use twice as much fertilizer as well. So in the other container, in the 4-liter jug, I used about 5 mils of fertilizer. So now I'm gonna have to up that to about 10. And we'll let those roots recover. I'm gonna have to find something to cover this pot as well, because this is too large for that plastic nursery pot to cover or block out the light. So I'm gonna have to find something large enough to cover this as well. I might just put a pillowcase on there and kind of go from there. Okay, I'm gonna grab my air pump and we'll let this just pump away. Okay, now I'm just gonna put the tube back on the port, and you can see instantly we got bubbles. I'm also gonna have to clean up this mess. My basement here is destroyed. I have water everywhere, little pieces of roots, I have a garden hose, I have my lights. So with any video that I do, I always have some cleanup to do at the end, but this one's gonna be a little more extensive. But I'm really happy that I got the plant into its new container of water. Gonna, like I said, let it recover. You can see the little air stone just doing its thing. Overall, the roots look really good. I'm glad I didn't chop it any further. You want the root system to sustain the size of the plant. You don't want to cut off too many roots because it's probably going to stunt the growth for a while. It's probably going to be stunted for a while anyways. So yeah, I'm curious to see what the newest leaf size will look like once it pushes out a new leaf. I don't know if it's looking to do so anytime soon, but it seems to put out some pretty consistent leaves over time, so I'll have to keep track more of the actual time frame for how often it puts out leaves and that sort of thing. Now for this one, I'm just going to take the top node, something like that, and I'll discard of this kind of growth stem, but I'll keep this, well, if it'll come off there. You can make an entirely new plant from this one. I might actually just clean this off and then stick it back in the water and see if we can get another growth point or a new plant from this one. You can see right here, it's usually like an oval structure. This one's looking a little crusty, but that is the growth point or growing eye. So if you do propagate a monstera and you chop it up like this, you want to make sure that you have a leaf and a node and then a growing eye right there. So this can go right back in water, you can put it in soil, but a new growth point will pop out from there eventually. Okay, look at these clean roots, good as new. So I'm just gonna stuff this one right back in the container. Let it filter down to the bottom, right in the water. I'm just gonna put it in the front for right now, and I'll put the leaf upright like that. So there you go. We'll see how it does down the road. Okay, so after a fairly extensive cleanup operation, everything's looking nice and tidy. No more glass pieces strewn about my basement here. The plant is back on the floor beside the IKEA greenhouse cabinet. The water pump is pumping away, and now I feel comfortable that I've set this plant up long-term or for long-term growth. It's in a larger container. I'll be adding the plank back on to the pot, or securing it to the back of the glass container with some Gorilla Tape. I'll have to find a suitable cover for the pot as well. But overall, like I said, I think I have this set up for some fairly long-term growth. I don't have to upsize it again for probably, I'm guessing, another year or so at least, and it has enough room on the plank to grow vertically as well. So hopefully you enjoyed this video. I hope you found it informative, and yeah, I guess if you have any comments or questions, please leave it down in the comment section. I always appreciate the support. Thanks for watching, everyone. Take care. Bye.